into something that we haven't done for a while, and I thought that we would have like a grow group style staffy to an extent, and that it would be an opportunity for us to just answer questions. And I thought to take it to more of a grow group style things, which we've done this before. I'm not being innovative, people. That you can ask questions to anyone that's in the room or anyone online, because we all know each other. You might feel like, man, this person really nails this aspect of life, or I'm intrigued to know a bit more about, whoever else does something. And I know that a few weeks ago I said we'll do like a Starfree roulette where you could put your topic out there. There were so many great topics there and so many great questions. I thought, man, there should be a lot to talk about today. So if you don't have a question off the top of your head right now, you could go back to one of the Starfree subjects that you wanted to talk about. I want to kind of maybe just frame it a little around the idea, though, still of like leadership, and leadership being personal and other. Like, how do you do life? How do you manage the day-to-day? How do you keep yourself in a way that is moving you, moving your team, moving your family? This leadership thing is all-encompassing, and I really do believe you lead out of the places that you live from. So if you're in a good space over here, you're going to lead from a good space over here. It's going to affect everything you do. So that being the case, I'm going to throw it up. You could put the question out there, and you could either write some down and we'll just start answering them off of the list, or you could come off mute and just let everybody hear your incredible voice and ask the question, and you can aim it at anybody in the staffy. Jesus, I pray that you take over this moment, and just that good gold comes out of it, Lord. There's so much to believe for, and I just pray that you take over this moment in Jesus' name. Amen. And last, I'll say just a simple merit of this, and I'd love you to replicate this when you lead a team once, however often you feel to do it, is that, there's a statement that clarification, the onus of clarification is on the hearer. Because obviously the person communicating doesn't know what hasn't been communicated, what has been under-communicated, what is not understood. So as people that are going through life, one of the best things to do is hear from your team, because you don't maybe always know what they might need, but when they have an opportunity to ask questions, all of a sudden things shift. So that's my thought. Let's go. Who's going to be the first person to ask a question? Yay!
Oh, it's still late, but we're gonna work through it. I would really love to. Oh, it's wait, I'm here echo.
Now you're your own backup person.
Okay, cool. I really would love to hear more about people's practices from the vein of health and wellness and reflection and reconciling the day. Like, what happens after a Sunday? I feel like Sundays are big, and there are lots of things that, one, I think God is speaking to us, and for all the blue folks in the room, like, we might be seeing things, but even for the purple people, execution, like, they might be like, ooh, there was a learning, and I just want to know more from maybe Pastor Chris. You could start us off. Sarah, I would love to hear from you. Like, what are some of your practices after a Sunday, and just reflecting on everything you may have seen or experienced? Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. I think from my perspective and my lens, I think, Sundays are obviously a very big day. It's the lead up of everything we do is on that moment. And so I think I have a few different things. After a Sunday, I'm typically, I process some things. I come out of it with all sorts of emotions, but I definitely put some boundaries on some of my thoughts. I know that off the back of a Sunday isn't my best moment to fully process. So what I do is I mark and I table for later, because the truth of it being, like, you work into a Sunday, it's at the end of our particular week in many ways. Well, we get a day or 2 days in between, but everything leads towards it. So by the time I'm off, speaking 2 messages or done on that Sunday, I've kind of like given everything I've got. And I think it takes a weight, there's a big strain to it. So what I typically do is I just know I'm not probably in the best place to kind of really process a bunch of stuff. So I just fill my day with things that are meaningful, things I love, and realize that not everything can be solved in the moment. And I kind of think that the way you rest on a Sunday, on the back end of it, really is for me about the way that you enter a Sunday. If everything in your life is riding on that Sunday, then man, at the end of every Sunday, it's either going to be a win or a Jesus, come back now and take me. And so for me, I just kind of go into every single day, every single moment, and I've adopted a mentality of I want to love, enjoy, and be passionate about the moments of growth. So I want to see the Sunday, see the opportunities, table them, and I want to run into Monday with passion and going, you know what, we can iterate, we can execute, we can get better. So then what that means for me is it gives space for Sunday off the back of pouring out to be really just open to hang out. Ords loves to cook on a Sunday, so she'll make like something that we love. We'll have people over, like last night after baptisms, we had the Politos, we had the Cadens, we had the Beatties, the Calazos, who else? Marissa, Danielle, Clampets, well, only two of the Clampets because some of them were sick. And honestly, it was so life-giving because it was like this meaningful Sunday of baptisms. It was great. And then it was really lovely to find people, and this is what we do every Sunday, you find people that you could do nothing with. Yeah. That you could be like, I think Renée looked at me for a second, she goes, are you all right? Because I was like staring off into the distance, I go, I'm just smashed. And she's like, oh. And we just hung out until like 10:30 at night, 9:30 at night. And it was just chill. And it was such a life-giving Sunday for me because that is the full expression of the church. It is the Sunday gathering, salvations, baptisms, then afterwards just hanging out and having ebbing and flowing out of deep and meaningful conversations and stupid conversations and eating too much. And it was just like a really beautiful Sunday. So that is what I find really restful and refueling.
Honestly, my answer is very similar. I would say like, mine's very similar because I think sometimes, specifically in like kids ministry, you can have a really difficult day. And for me, I've just kind of come into the practice that it's okay for me to like feel the feelings after a Sunday and like go in my car as I drive home or like when I get home and just be like, wow, that was hard today, or like just like letting myself feel it but then just resting. Because I think if I would immediately go into executor mode knowing exactly what I needed to like fix and change and all this stuff, it would be me trying to control out of my emotion versus letting God saturate my thoughts and just like giving it the rest and waking up on a Monday and being like, okay, God, like, what are the things about this that we need to iterate to try again on Sunday? And just also, I think it's a good practice just to rest and let it completely go and like literally clear your mind of church in general after you leave because you don't want it to be too much of you and too much of striving and too much of we could have. A lot is so much out of your control that I think, just the rest. I'm the same. Great.
Yeah, I love that.
Sometimes you just have to say, that's a Monday problem.
Yeah, so good.
And just relax. And just, I think the worst thing, and maybe there are some Sundays where you want to go home and you just want to recharge if you're an introvert. But honestly, I think sometimes that could be a big mistake because you're recharging alone. Sometimes you need to recharge with people that have given the Sunday just as much as you have. And you could just sit and celebrate, sit and eat, sit and relax, and then not necessarily debrief too much of it. You can talk about the good aspects of it. It's not like you're living in a state of denial, but sometimes you just have to apply the discipline. Actually, that's a Monday problem.
Yeah.
So
I think there's a real, and to what everyone's saying, I think for everyone, whether you're at work, and this is a real both personality thing, but it's also like an internal worth and value thing. It's the idea of wanting to be sometimes celebrated that gives me and gives all of us to an extent like validation and all that kind of stuff. And I think you should never, ever put too much weight on any one thing, moment, place, event, or Sunday, or promotion, or anything. The more weight you give it is the more that it can come crashing down on you. And if something has the power to bring you low, you gave it too much power.
Yeah.
And so I think that, whether it's Maddie with creative or me with a message, like, I think Michael Jordan said the reason he took so many shots and he wasn't afraid is like, at the end of the day, it was just a shot and it's just a game. but he still matched it so well with a fervor and passion to win. And so I think the goal is be inspired out of your passion for what we're called to do. But if, man, any Sunday, any team meeting, any number, any stat that comes across your table has the ability to put you in a state of depression, you've given it way too much weight, and you've probably got it way out of, not probably, you have it way out of balance, and it's going to mess you up. You can't live that way.
I think sometimes delineate between a leadership problem and a heart problem, right? I think
That's good.
if we feel like we failed on a Sunday, it's like the heart and leadership gets clustered into the one thing, and I think that's where the depression and that's where the feeling really terrible comes from. But if you can delineate and you can decipher, okay, no, that's not my heart, because my heart's all in. That was just a leadership gap, and I didn't see it. I made a mistake. My leader that gave me that feedback, it's not an attack on me. It's actually just an area that I missed. And sometimes, and I said it a few weeks back, I'm like, guys, we're not perfect. We're like, obviously want to be excellent, and we want to like hit as closely to the mark as we possibly can. But honestly, it's not about perfection. It's giving God our best. And if you think you gave God your absolute best, you know, and then you have to circle back on a Monday to fix the Monday problem, you know, don't beat yourself up and don't internalize a loss in that way. So
And I think a lot of this comes down to you. Sometimes we like to blame people that we don't know that we can't rest. But sometimes it's an imaginary expectation from a crowd that isn't watching that closely. And what we've got to kind of go is like, man, if I'm actually going to recover this situation, like if I'm going to actually revisit this, I have to both rest and recover. And I think, you know, for me, that's what I love what Aud said. I thought she summed it up so well. Like, some things are just a Monday problem. And if anything, they're a Monday opportunity. And if you can live like that, then you give yourself the space to rest, recover, refuel, and then you go into Monday with inspiration to change it. But the worst time to try fix something is when it just hit you. Because you're like you're frustrated, you're hurt, you're like, oh man, I tried all week. It's just not the best time. So give yourself some space, and I think you'll attack things in a better way, and you'll be refreshed, and you need time off. Because sometimes it's not that it's heavy, it's that we're carrying it wrong. In fact, when we were watching for years, when you have a kid, you're going to know this. Anyone that's had a kid will know this. The most awkward piece of kid equipment to carry is the car seat. And the more they eat and heavier, and the more they grow, you're like kind of off, and man, you end up with only abs on your left side. You're like basically, you know, it's just the worst thing. And then I watched the video, and you're supposed to bring your hand, scoop it in, and hold it like this. And now, once I did that, I was like, I could talk for hours. I was just carrying it for the sake that it didn't even hurt. And a lot of what we carry in life, personally, emotionally, relationally, is not as heavy as it actually feels. We're just carrying it wrong.
That's cool. Great question. There's a lot of people that entered the room. Maybe you can reiterate.
Oh, so yeah, guys, we're doing like a grow group style. We do this often, you know. We ask questions. It came from the idea a few weeks ago. Well, we do it, and as well, a few weeks ago, you all had such brilliant topics that you would have loved to hear from. So I thought it's an opportunity for us to do rapid fire questions for anyone that's in the staffy, or Oz and I, as always. And we just spoke about a great topic that Brianna Ford brought up, and it was like, how do we personally rest and recover and just do the Sunday after such a big day? So Sarah shared, and it was absolutely inspired. Audrey shared, and it was like a sage of wisdom. I shared, and it was filler.
Oh, whatever.
I've got a question so on this topic for both of you to answer. Looking back at your college days, when you were in Bible college and you were serving hard out, we've heard stories of you getting 3 hours sleep, 4 hours sleep, whatever it was. Looking back now, what were the things you would have done differently, knowing it would lead to whether it's a sweeter spirit with longevity in ministry, or like anything that all of us can learn that we aren't on staff yet, but it's good principles, good habits we can put in place so that we can be at your age and loving ministry.
Yeah.
At a very young age.
No, I love that.
Age.
I'm with it. I'm about to be 41. I'm okay, I'll wear it. That's a great question. And I don't know how helpful this will really be to anyone, because what I'm going to speak to is really going to have to align your internal clock and motivator type thing. But I remember, I was working 3 jobs. I was doing Bible college and I was serving extremely hard. And so I was averaging 3 hours a night sleep for a long time. And I remember people started to get concerned and they were like, man, you shouldn't do that. And honestly, from a physical perspective, I think it was going to have its toll. But I actually struggled when I got more sleep than less sleep for some reason. Less sleep made me just go, But I'm also the kind of person that will finish any day and every day fueled by people. So like when at the end of a big day, I can't just go to my room and chill. I have to hang out with people. So I could have got 7 hours if I wanted, or 6, but I had to go hang with people. So I would hang out till like 2 a.m. and then get up and go to scaffolding at 5 a.m. and whatever. But to be honest, like I never struggled with my heart attitude. I never struggled with that. And the reason is I genuinely love what I do. Like I love it. I love it as much as I love golf. Like I love the problems of it. I love the complexities of it. I'm filled with hope. I'm filled with expectancy. Like this isn't something I'm doing out of conviction or validation, or not even conviction, from external people's force. And like I gave up something I loved to do this, and every day in it, I was just living my dream. Like I've worked in offices and I couldn't stand it for a second. I did advertising, and whilst it had moments of fun, I did sales, and I even loved soccer, but I loved playing. I didn't really love the training portion, especially when you're not getting to touch a ball. But ministry, I loved going to Bible college, starting my day. Like I loved running security on a Saturday night. I just love being in the house. I love it. I would do it with every waking hour. So for me, because I love it and I genuinely love it, I just never felt the strain. Any strain that I ever felt was out of personal growth that needed to happen. So I had to definitely fight different aspects that started to taint things for me maybe, and it was like, man, you're failing, or man, am I doing okay? And maybe even navigating my own personality as a very driven person amongst teams. But I never felt a whip from above. And maybe it was a beautiful, lucky cross section of people asked a lot, but I was just willing to do it because I loved it. And maybe that the only lesson I could tell you is do things because you genuinely want to do them. Say yes to the things that people ask or invite you to because you want to do them.
Right.
So I think my simple answer, I guess if I could reduce it, sorry for the long-winded, is just, people asked a lot, but everything that they asked for, I loved. And I also came from a world where I was in the nightclubs and I was drinking and I was doing drugs and I was stealing and sleeping around. And so here I am saved, and I just felt like, man, I have given every aspect of my life hours to a million other things. I love this thing. But there are seasons that my biggest battle was just me needing to be bigger. And that was my sting. My sting was like, dang it, I'm not good at this yet. Or dang it, I didn't lead that team well. Those were stings, but they never made me want to quit because it was like, I love this. So I don't know, that's just how it's always been for me.
I'm kind of struggling to answer the question a little bit because, I think the first thing that comes to mind is I wish 24 Audrey would have known that there's so much capacity and margin in her, even 20 years later. I think when you're in it as a 24-year-old, you think that you are just so stretched beyond limitations and you cannot give anymore. And you go 20 years later, 4 kids later, a church plant, ups and downs, financial setbacks and whatnot, you realize that you actually do have a lot of capacity. And I think for some of you in this room who feel like the rubber band is about to snap, just know that there's more in you. And people ask me, Audrey, how do you do it all? I'm like, listen, I didn't get married and have 4 kids overnight.
Right.
Like I had 1 and then I had 2. And with every child, with every year,
Yeah.
you grow in capacity.
Yeah.
And I just want to shout your message yesterday, Chris, because I feel like it lines up with that. It's being faithful. It's saying yes to the things
Yeah.
that you want to do and you're called to doing, and allowing for God to continue to persuade you,
Yeah.
whether that be for growth, for margin, for capacity, for stepping into more.
Right.
And I think we just get in the way, and we don't want to be stretched.
Right.
And to be honest, I lived under false theology that if you were in God's will and everything was going really bad, then you're headed in the wrong direction. So I would often question God's heart and his motive, because surely if you're doing his will, it should all work out. But your message, and just over the years, that's been challenged, and that's a theological,
Right.
it was just warped, and I had to correct that. Just because it's not going right doesn't mean that the direction that you're going in is wrong.
Right.
This is about stretching. This is about capacity building. This is so that in 20 years' time, you can look back and go, oh, I'm not that same person.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to drown in that glass of water.
Yeah.
I just had to level up and
Yeah.
grow up too.
Yeah.
And so I think I look back and I'm like, I wish I would have done more,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Wow.
Even feeling a bit overwhelmed, I felt like I could have done more. But
Yeah.
I was feeling the pain of the stretch, and I got timid and I would just shy back.
Wow.
And I think it's time for us to go, okay, if I'm feeling the stretch, I think it's okay to keep
Yeah.
going, because
That's
we're
really good.
rebuilding muscle.
Yeah.
And this isn't about burning out, you guys, because I feel like I want you to hear my heart here. Because some of you are like, oh, burnout, you're going to so easily burn out. And I do want to just reiterate what Chris just said, that, if you are, if you've been called to take office, right, in this, and Mo said it so significantly. She said, we think we can take off this garment of office
Yeah.
as if it's a cloak you get to choose
Yeah.
to put on and off. She goes, that office will chase you down for the rest of your life, because that is embedded in your DNA.
Yeah.
It's embedded in your assignments, embedded into your purpose. And so I just think some of you have been called, few are chosen, what is it? So many are chosen, but few are called. And I think some people just don't want it because they don't want to go through they don't want to go through it,
Yeah.
which is going to bring aspects of
Yeah.
growing pains. So anyway, I just feel
I love
like
that.
this is not about burnout. This is about you taking up your office
Yeah.
and running with it,
Yeah.
and letting God do what he's going to do
Yeah.
in and through you.
You know what? I want to add on to that and kind of speak a bit on that as well, because I think that the burnout conversation is really interesting because I've never burnt out. But, man, I've had really, really low moments.
Yeah.
Really. Remember that time remember when, I was going through the house thing? I actually lost the house. I remember we lost it, and it was on the 24th of December. It was gone. And on top of that, somehow the judge ruled that I owed an extra $230,000, on top of that. And I remember when I got the news, and I was like, oh, you got to pray for me. You've heard me preach about anxiety. I haven't had anxiety or an anxiety attack since I was 19. But when she started to pray for me, it just started, and I was like, wait, stop, I can't, I'm about to lose it. That was on a Thursday or whatever day it was. I still preached the following Sunday. And I think that I look back and I go, well, what is it about burnout? I can't even say that as I speak right now, I fully understand it. I just know that my fear of burning out or something being wrong is probably greater than something being wrong.
Yeah.
And I feel like Chris Hodges spoke a great message as well at our conference about when you're called into this by God, you can only be called out of it by God.
Yeah.
Yes.
And having a responsibility to the call.
Yeah.
But then there's also the realities that Paul references so well. And he even says, and he references that, why does he do what he doesn't want to do, but doesn't do what he does want to do? And another one that he speaks about is how he buffets his body daily, that he too would not be disqualified at the end of this. And I want to bring all this together with just, I can't say I'm an exhaustive list. I can only speak out of me. And I want you to live out of you.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But I know this, that I have almost quit and I'm going to relate it now to this. Where do I think I learned my capacity and longevity? And it was two major frameworks that I think taught me this. Number one, I have chosen to not have a way out.
Yeah.
Wow.
For me, the price of being out is much greater and more detrimental than the cost of being in and being tired.
Come on.
If for me, being out, I ask myself, what does it do to you? If I give in to a temptation, what does that do to you?
That's awesome.
If I quit, what does it do to you in this room? In a world where you've already seen so many pastors fail. In a world where you've looked up, where a lot of you have referenced in meetings, moments, and personal cards and thank yous, that it has been the hard times that Audrey and I have done that has given you inspiration for the hard times that you have done. What do I do knowing that I will face my Creator one day and that I have been charged with the responsibility and that I will be judged more harshly because I am a teacher of the word than anyone else? How do I know? That to me is the cost of being out. The cost of being in is I'm tired, I'm human, I'm insecure, I'm disappointed, but I don't have a way out because out costs me more than in.
Yes.
And I would tell that to anybody that's married.
Yeah.
I sat at my house closing and all the lawyers were talking about how they won divorce, the other two wanted to divorce, but they said, I ran the numbers on it and it's honestly, it's not worth it.
Wow.
And you know, it sounded cold and callous, but I'll tell you what, it is wise. Sometimes the cost of being out is greater than the cost of being in, and wisdom is the only way you know that. The second construct is this. I got a rude awakening when I went from playing club soccer to really I was semi-professional, whatever it would be the level, right? The level that I was playing, and the demand on your body is insane. And they don't care for your soul. There's another 7 people that want your position. So you have to know what it feels like to run until you taste blood. And then if you die, that would go through my mind. If I have a heart attack here, I guess I died trying for what I wanted. Because if I die, he'll get my spot. If I don't die, I'm not going to watch someone take my spot. So, that's what I had to do. And I learned. On one training session, he looked at us and he goes, all right, we're doing 10 200-meter sprints. The minute the next guy gets to you, you go. And whoever stops, don't even think of coming back for next week. So it's like, oh, crap. And I was like, there's no way I can do it, but we'll see as far as I get. And I got to the end, collapsed on the finish line, got a migraine. My dad had to pick me up. I ended up in hospital because when I get migraines, back then they used to be really bad. I'd end up on morphine and stuff like that. But I learned that while I was upset with myself and tired from working 3 jobs, it was nowhere near as painful as the 200-meter sprints. And I thought, if my body can do that, I can do hard things. I just haven't pushed myself to a place where I've almost wanted to quit, gone further and realized that quitting, I thought I was going to quit 6 months ago, but I didn't know I had another 6 months in me. I thought I was going to quit 30 miles ago, but I didn't know I had another 20 in me. And I want to just challenge you on this. Paul makes it clear that he draws a relationship between his spirit and his flesh. And if your flesh cannot do hard things, your spirit will definitely not. Because as Mo spoke, we live either from the flesh to the spirit or the spirit to the flesh. However, the flesh, for as long as we are here, is always there, which is why the sacrifice of Jesus is so beautiful. Because on that cross, while he was 100% God, he was 100% man. Which meant he carried the distinct things that we carry on a daily that makes you want to quit. And if it took full God to show us that you can overcome that, then let that be a lesson that we should not be so easily overlooking that piece of our nature and human experience that could so easily disqualify us. So I want to challenge you and encourage you, pick a physical thing that is difficult for you and do that thing. And don't do it once, because you gotta stay in tight relationship with pain so that you understand that you can push through it. And that you can live in such a way that, man, I can fast. Man, I can run a marathon. Man, I can lift. Last one I'll say is I was concerned. I haven't done fitness in years, and I went to this thing called, what's it called? That horrible place we went? Strive Village, horrible place. It's hell. And their whole, so you know how there's high intensity but low weights? They do high intensity, high reps, high weights. So it's great. And I remember my hands started cramping up, and I haven't done exercise in so long that I was like, am I having a stroke? And the dude just looks at me and goes, no, keep going, you're just lifting heavy-ish. I was like, you're right. I ended up on the ground for 40 minutes afterwards in their bathroom, but I got it done. I just want to encourage you, push yourself because there's so much more in you, but don't push yourself if you don't have the internal fortitude and conviction that God's got you where you're meant to be.
Yeah.
If not, you're just going to get angry at someone, offended, frustrated, and that's not going to be good for anyone. So,
And don't do it for man.
don't do it for me.
Don't do it to impress anyone.
Yeah.
And I get what you mean about like quitting and how much more of an impact that would have at this level. But I think that's a little bit different than trying to impress man. That's the weight of leadership.
Yeah.
And that is like the demand and, just like the weight of calling at this level. But I think when he speaks of that aspect and not doing it for man, it's completely different. Like, don't try to do the work and try to prove your way through because there's an insecurity or you're trying to prove something. I think it's important to try to let the work forge the thing in you so that you become what God is trying to pull out of you.
So
There's a
good.
difference.
Let me say something to that because I had to wrestle with this concept. So I would say that God has been working on me in the last 10 years in ways that have been so profound, deep, and testing. I had so much external success in my first 10 years of ministry, or first 5 maybe. And in my latter 11, I have not seen as many external. I'm only now seeing a lot of that. And then pandemic came and then I'm seeing more now. So just to say that I was sitting with God only a few months ago and I was like, man, God, like, I thought when I said yes to ministry that I said yes out of a good place. But then when I landed in Chicago, I realized that quickly in the first 3 years, there was so much ugly you had to work out of me. And I didn't know how to reconcile that. It made me question my yes at the beginning. I was like, was that broken? Was that ugly? Why was that? I don't get it. Was it because of me? And I felt like what God highlighted is you said yes out of the right place, but you also couldn't help but to still live from a broken place.
Yeah, right.
And so when it comes to this concept of like going all in and saying yes, I want to remind you that you must say yes out of a good place, out of a good motive, and it can only be out of a place of carrying your cross, sacrifice, privilege. Wow, God, I get to do this. But expect that bad motives and all the rest of it will creep in.
Yeah.
That you might have approached the platform on your first message out of a really good place. But 57 messages in, you might find that you start to build a bit of pomp and a bit of notoriety and a bit of like, wow, this is me. And it's because you're a flawed, broken human. And this idea of buffeting your body is the necessity to remember that this thing can corrupt you. And I want to just put it out there to anybody that's considering getting into ministry. This is a dangerous endeavor for someone who wants to be validated or wants to be approved of, or is doing this to do it because maybe they'll recognize me, or I love this community, it'd be nice to be in the in crowd, so I'll serve my way into the in crowd. I will tell you that you are playing with fire. It will destroy you because there is an enemy that wants to see it. And this thing is you're stewarding glory. You're stewarding glory that must always and foremost go back to God. Every great message, every great team that you build is because God gave you capacity, because you entered into this relationship through faith. You now have access to both the grace that forgives you and the grace that empowers you. And it is through that faith that you should always remember that every compliment, every achievement is not you. But if you are achievement and validation starved, you will start to find that you will build your personality and you will build your happiness on the fact that you do this, not the fact that you do this with God out of a relationship. And I said at the beginning of this, Staffy, you will always lead from the places you live from. My biggest challenge in this season of my life as I'm 40, and I love that. Like, I love that now. I've been in it long enough and I'm still in it. And I pray to be able to speak to you at 60 and 80.
Yeah.
But is that I notice now that as life ebbs and flows, I can camp in some seasons, I can visit some seasons, I just can't camp there. And what that means is I've got to make sure that I'm happy with every other aspect of life, because that's where I'm going to lead from. If I'm joyful here, like in this aspect of life that you don't see, I'll be joyful in this meeting.
Yeah.
If I'm passionate in the seasons and the places that you don't see, I'll be passionate on the stage. If I'm creative and innovative and at peace in this place, it'll transfer to this place. But as a leader, if you're not in peace here, you'll get over here, and before you know it, you could put the facade on, you can have the sayings and the mantras, but it won't truly come from that. And so if your home is not in order, get your home in order. Because your home is your respite. Your home is your refuel. And sometimes if you live alone, maybe that might be the problem.
Wow.
Your home is isolated, and then you want to lead in crowds, but you live in isolation.
Wow.
Don't lead. Please do not show up for a role. Show up for a calling.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
It's great. It's very good.
Can I ask a question?
Go for it, Fallon.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite. So I know we're kind of a little bit, or the initial question was kind of you're at a breaking point. My question is, if you're at a place of victory, right? I think of like the Israelites walking over Jericho and the walls come tumbling down, right? And they're like at a point of their peak. They're like, we just did this, or like God just did this with us, right? And this is happening. My question is, how do you sustain the victory so it becomes a lifestyle versus a moment, and what does that look like for you guys?
So in order to sustain a victory, let me say this. You have to redefine, classify, and determine where victory is truly lived. If victory is a moment and a set of achievements, then that I'm here to tell you that just doesn't last. You can build a theme of achievements, which, to answer your question easily, is make sure that you don't live in the achievement, but live in the recipe that brought it. So the achievement is the day that the walls came down, but the recipe that brought it was complete dependence on God and trusting at every moment that He speaks and acting in obedience. That's the recipe. Live there. And that will build a theme of victories, right? But that doesn't really truly answer the question. I said a quote from Plato on Sunday, and it's not the goal of life is not to end up with the most, but to need the least. So if we take that framework of how are you indestructible and how are you most fireproof, well, the only way to be fireproof in the conversation about living from a place of victory is that victory must be lived out in Christ. So my victory is that if I live in Him, Galatians that Cruz put for his baptism says this, to be baptized is to put on Christ. If I put on Christ, if I live in Christ, what does that look like emotionally, physically, and practically? It means this, that practically my greatest goal in life is not to wake up and gain more, but my goal in life is to wake up, put a bit of time aside to sit with my Father in heaven and feel His presence and know that my victory is that. That is the human victory. And Romans 5 says, when at just at the right time, when we were powerless and dead to our sin, Jesus died for us. At just the right time. So that means that as someone who has struggled with the internal things of life, like mental illness and depression and things of that nature, and knowing that the extrinsic in my life is at the mercy of the intrinsic of my life, what I know is that the greatest thing I have to offer, or offer myself, or victory, is that I wake up in victory and I go to bed in victory. I wake up in victory by getting in the presence of God and knowing that He's still my Savior and that I need nothing else in the world, nothing else. So therefore you can't bribe me, you can't win me over, you can't mean more to me than what you think you do, you can't mean enough, I won't put enough more pressure on you than what you could ever withstand, because you're not you're not my salvation, either is she. And if I can live in that place and stay in that place, which is not always easy, it is a discipline. If I live there, I live in victory. Because my victory is that I'm forgiven. And maybe that doesn't make sense to you unless you are aware of how much you need it, or you've done enough that requires it. I've done enough that requires it. So when I live in this place, that to me is victory. My victory is that I'm here to please God. And what seems to please God more than anything is my relationship with Him and my obedience for Him. my love for him. If I can stay in that, then I'm eternally victorious.
Yeah.
The rest of it is just as important, or maybe not as important, but up there in importance,
Yeah.
and very much an aspect of life. And Garden City would really be a book that would speak to this aspect. Is, I want to achieve while I'm here on earth. And I can build a good theme of achievements by making sure, be this. Don't be the sum of your context, be the sum of your character. Your context will determine what you do. Your character is what you do no matter what happens.
Yeah.
So if your character and you build your way of living around the things that bring victories, you're going to see multiple victories. So Jordan just always practiced. He just always had work ethic. Elon Musk, same thing. The Jericho conversation, or Moses, or any of the greats, Paul, they depended on a relationship with God, and that's always going to bring the external wins that you always hope for as well.
Right.
So if you want to build a theme of winning, live in health. If you want to live in eternal victory, live in Christ.
Yeah. Wow. Good.
Fun.
It's great.
I have a question.
Yep.
So, we've been talking a lot about spiritual gifts, and I know that God has given me the gift of faith, and that produces like the gift of miracles and healing. And I've been thinking a lot about even our time when we did internship, and I felt like we were seeing a lot of that, just healing and really miraculous things. And so it's funny because I was on the 606 the other day, and as God is talking about this, I see this man walking, and he does not have arms. And I'm like, okay, God, well, am I just supposed to go and pray for him, like, in this moment? And so I guess my question in all that is, how do you, it's not even how do you stir up, but how do you discern what is, like, force versus, no, this is the way that God is wanting to move in this moment?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think it's such a great question, because that scenario that Eva says, there's a man walking down the 606 without arms. She's feeling convicted lately on the gift of faith and healing. It's massive, because it's like, by me not praying for him, am I denying that gift?
Right.
But now are you living from a place of works in that moment because you think that this is the marker of true faith?
Yeah.
And I think the greatest thing is this: you got to know the God moment. Well, someone could say that's ridiculous. Well, it's not ridiculous to anybody that has done third world missions. Anyone's done third world missions sees people like their legs, limbs grow. I personally have seen crazy things. Personally, Gio and I have seen from people that have come up to us with broken legs, healed. Like, we've seen that. And I've got my own story of how I prayed for one day I'll tell it in more detail, but I was working with a coworker. She got a phone call, and her brother-in-law died in a car accident on impact instantly, as per the police. I had just gotten saved, and I saw this Reinhard Bonnke, which, if you don't know who he is, look him up. But when he preached, people would literally raise from the dead, and it's been documented. There's a video of it. It's crazy, right? So I saw this, and I'm new to Christianity, and everyone's just like in church, like, oh yeah, Reinhard Bonnke's coming, and I'm like, did we see this? The man brought someone. So anyway, I just seen this. I'm new. I'm me. So I was like, she's like, he just died. I go, don't worry, I'm gonna pray. And she's like, looked at me like, you're an idiot. So I called my grow group. We prayed. I see her a week later, and she goes, the craziest thing happened. I'm like, what? She goes, my brother-in-law wasn't dead at all. In fact, he got up, walked out of the crash site without a bruise or a scratch on him.
Wow.
So a seasoned police officer pronounced him dead on sight,
Yeah.
but then he walked off.
Yeah.
Now, I can't verify it with my camera, but that is pretty amazing. And I've seen many things like that. I would just say this: faith favors the bold.
Yeah.
And I think, though, you also have to be instructed by God. Jesus knew quite well that he was limited by the expectancy in the room quite often. And we know that not everybody that brushed up or touched Jesus drew down from Jesus what Jesus had to offer. And there is unbelief in this room as I speak this subject. There's unbelief in this screen as I speak this subject.
Yeah.
And for those people with unbelief, they're the only people that don't get fed.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm fed and they don't want to eat, that's not my problem. So, you get to feed the people that want to eat. I can't make my kids come down for dinner anymore. But I'm not going to be that parent. We're going to eat. And if you're starving and the kitchen's closed, lesson learned.
Yeah.
So I just have always had to be like obedient to God. Now, I will say this. Now, the greatest thing I would say to navigate this is obedience. And then you got to really know you. Are you the person turning up the worship music in the street just because you're like, I will not deny him? It's like, calm down, like that's a separate, are you just ashamed? I don't know, figure that out. But there was a moment, 2 significant moments in my life around the same subject. A woman in our church had just gotten I think it's called a hysterectomy of the wombs. And I walked past her and I felt the Holy Spirit, and I know the Holy Spirit brought me to tears and said, pray for her because she will have children again. And I didn't do it. And so obedience, I think, is the most important thing that we have to act on with faith.
I think the most important prayer to pray.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I just wanted to add on to that because with Eva's question, I've been dealing with the same type of thing. And I always used to remember, it struck from this. I saw a conversation on YouTube that was disobedience from God doesn't build the kingdom, but it inadvertently builds the wrong kingdom. And so I've just been struck with, oh my goodness, if I'm hearing from God, even if I have just like 5%, this couldn't be him, I've got to do what I can to try and follow that. And so I've had moments in the past 2 weeks where I feel like I hear from God, and I'm like, okay, I have to go talk to this person, and they're complete strangers. And so I just remember I had a grandfather who passed away a couple years ago, and he was notorious for always just talking to random people. I was like, well, how can you go up and talk to random people? But I'm hearing from God, and I can't do this. And so I put it upon myself. I'm like, well, I'm not going to go up to them and be like, God told me this, and completely freak them out. So I was like, let me take a page from my grandfather's book and just be like, God, how can I approach this person? And oftentimes you'll spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Sometimes I've been taken into a convenience store because of it. You just have to live with the inconvenience of where can this conversation go? But I know God wants to do something, and I've had a couple instances over the past 2 weeks where it's just okay, I'm going to lead into this inconvenience. I'm going to approach this person, and we might not even talk about God for 5-10 minutes, but it'll either end with a prayer, or it'll end with a God bless you, or it'll end it happened this past weekend where I really just flat out said after 2 minutes, I was like, hey man, I overheard you talking about this. I feel like God just said this with this verse, and I just want to encourage you with that. And it's very simple. Get out of your head over how awkward it is and approach people with, starting a conversation isn't that hard. Even if nothing comes out of it, at least you follow the command that says God to go up to that person. You never know what happened. But I think we just have to be better overall, because people call me out all the time oh, you can just talk to anybody. I think everybody should. I think everyone should, have some sort of point where they can be approachable with everyone. And I think that will go so long in following the obedience of God of it could be pray for that man's cerebral arms, and the conversation starts off with, hey, I love your shoes, or something like that. You never know.
Yeah, I love that, Adam. I think the Prayer of Jabez is an old book, but he would go up to people in airports and say, hey, what can I do for you? Or he'd go up anywhere. Hey, what can I do for you? That's sometimes you can segue that into a conversation very easily. And the second thing is we see Jesus look at what is an apparent need and still ask the question, what do you want from me?
Yeah. I was just going to say that I think the miracle starts with self. So before going and having the faith for somebody's arms to grow back, I think you need to ask God for the boldness that you need in those moments, and let your faith and your boldness spring out of that conversation first, than just being a spiritual crazy fire hose that's just going everywhere, which obviously God can use, but then coming away from those moments almost feeling the shame of them because you didn't see God move. But out of obedience and going, okay, God, it starts with me first. Give me the boldness. Stir up my faith. So that when I'm in those moments, I'll go as an act of obedience and discernment and promptings, rather than just okay, here I am. It's just going to run through this and hopefully come out with the most favorable outcome. But then you feel a little bit silly for that.
Yeah.
So you're gonna need that boldness
Yeah.
to follow through.
Right.
I think this as well. What I've observed as I watch people do this journey, sometimes I watch people and I go, who's this miracle actually for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, is the miracle for the man with the no arms, or is the miracle for you and your ego?
Yeah.
Is the miracle for him to believe, or the miracle for your unbelief?
Wow.
And I see a lot of Christians go to supernatural conferences because the miracles actually are for them. I need to see gold dust. I want to see. It's like, well, what do you need the miracle? I'm a big believer in miracles for movement. And what that means to me is that Jesus performed signs and wonders so that people would believe, and also to improve the quality of the person that he was just serving and showing mercy and compassion on. So like, if the miracle is about them, brilliant. But if the miracle is about you because you don't believe or because of whatever, then you've just now already in a bad place.
So good.
Well,
So good, Chris.
that's 12 o'clock. It has been a fun stuff, you guys. I don't know. Maybe we do a round 2 of this next week. I don't know what you think, but I've enjoyed it. So,
I think we might be off Monday, so
It's
there we go.
oh, it's Juneteenth. We do not have Staffy. So, guys, it's going to be 2 weeks before meals.
Come with your questions.
Come with your questions. Love you all very much. See you Sunday. Father's Day. Celebrate your dads. Invite your dads. See you guys.